Om Purusham Artam Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprashavaha Kaivalya Swarupa Pratista Vachiti Shakti iti. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That primordial Shakti power which takes transmigrating consciousness back to its source, stripping name and form from nature as it does so, accomplishes both these tasks, and the soul attains to its ultimate emancipation. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Nicho Nichanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bhavanam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmas Tam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shantihi Shashvati Netaresham. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one, the seers realize, as residing in their own self. To them belong peace, and to no one else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May that Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May it sustain us. May it illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with the world, with the teachings, or with each other. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We welcome you all here to SRV Loka, to this website where we broadcast quite often during the week, but on Sundays specifically we do the Atmagyan teachings in large amounts, as Swami Vivekananda used to say. When the West try and give them the teachings on Brahman, but they can only take little bits of it so far. And he was saying this back in early 1900s when he arrived here, and late 1800s. He made 2 visits to us. So he was seeing how we had to develop this taste or this thirst for these teachings. Whereas, as he said often, this thirst for life, forever quench that, because it drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. So he was here to give us some very profound messages on not only the base dualities that we call pleasure and pain and virtue and vice that flummox a lot of minds, even today, confuse a lot of people, but these higher dualities such as bondage and liberation, and form and formlessness. Those are very worthy of contemplating along the run of dualities, because the mind is dual, so we're always trying to make it one-pointed, focused, concentrated. Ekagra is the word in yoga. And then hopefully hold that one-pointedness and go about our life with that one-pointedness. We were talking yesterday at God Blogs, which is our philosophical discussion of the deeper ramifications of the stories that the seers tell, particularly Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, but Lord Buddha and the Dhammapada and Jesus Christ 500 years later after Buddha were always talking in terms of these stories and metaphors, so that all the folk, all the different beings in the different lokas could be informed as to the nature of both relativity and reality. And that's what the subject we're broaching when we mention a word like Kaivalya. We've taken 2 classes to define the word Kaivalya with some charts, generally spoken of as isolation, and generally thought of as isolation from nature. That is, from name, form, which are more external to most people, although they have internal origins. And then time, space, which are more internal. And then causality, which is also, well, both external and internal, but the origins again being internal. These 5 things are called Maya when you put them together. So one of the wonderful definitions that Swami Vivekananda gave to us when other people were calling Maya just illusion when he arrived on the scene in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in this country, and also went to London several times in England. So he was here amongst the Westerners, which generally known for mastering the material universe, would be their boast, if any. And he was here to give us teachings on spirituality, and it had to broach the subject and maybe connect, as we've been trying to do, the external to the internal. Because we just stay in the external, then we don't know the origins of things. And utpatti, origin, is a word in Sanskrit that is very dear to Samkhya yogins and Ashtanga yogins and Tantrasists and Vedantas. They hold this word quite dear, because if you take it seriously, then you're dissatisfied with marching in towards looking at atomic particles and neutrons and quarks and subatomic particles. You find out that they're not giving you any real substance, and they're not an origin in themselves. That means it's just emptiness, as shunyata is the word I just chanted. Gunanam, shunyanam, vachati shaktihi. The Shakti would have it different, would have you think differently about origins. Is that everything out here came from internal, came from the mind. And therefore you'd be inspecting your mind like maybe you would do when you practice reading scripture, swadhyaya, and place manana into effect. That is, you sit down with a sloka or a sutra or a sura or any kind of phrase of higher truth in the scriptures. Most all the scriptures of the world hold them. And then you contemplate it, you put the mind's eye on it, and for a long time you'd watch it. Aren't you watching your atomic particles for a long time, or are you just seeing that they're there and giving up? So to know their nature, that they're constantly changing. Then if you took your mind and put its attention on something for long enough, for a long time, say months, years, a lifetime, several lifetimes, is not anything unusual to the Hindu philosophy, to the Vedanta, then you would begin to come up with its secrets. Yes, you'd know that it was all changing, but the changes there taking on a different level of intensity, a different kind of vibration, which brings about the teaching of the 6 ways to know Brahman, which I'll show you in a second. Because we've taken up 9, 10 slokas of the Kaivalya Upanisad now. I won't reread them for you right now because You can look back if you want to remember them, but that's almost half of the Kaivalya Upanishad, and we're going to try and make headway today that will place us into a position to finish the Kaivalya Upanishad next Sunday at this time. The 25 sloka Upanishad is not that long generally for the Upanishads, but it does give us a chance in 4 classes to take apart a great scripture like that the way I like to do it, which is taking your time with it and going deep with it, with your mind focused in an atmosphere that's conducive to it. All the requisites have to be satisfied. And that's why there should be a kind of formality to even your practice at home. Because asajamaya mala manto anutana malaganta. Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada, that slothfulness is the rust of societies, leading to calamity. Non-recitation of wisdom scriptures is the rust of monasteries, and non-self-effort is the rust of households. So be like the noble guard at the gates of a vast city. Always be on vigil like that. And so you're going to want to set up the atmosphere in your household, is what I'm getting at here, because most Westerners are mostly householders, very few monastics here. So the householders then have to set up the requisites for the study, and these classes will help you do that. You're in the atmosphere of the Dharma now, there's no denying that. Here's what the seers have told you, here's the scriptures we've got it from, here's the seers we follow. See, so basically, how to put it, our refuge is Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother. Our goal is Sri Ramakrishna, the avatar of the age. Our guide is Swami Vivekananda, whom I'm just speaking about. So we have refuge, goal, and guide all rolled in one here. SRV, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda Association. And people right now are looking on from Europe. Hello everyone in Hungary and Iceland and other places. Some people from India there, some people from all parts of America, tuning in more and more to our classes and helping them, most of them householders of course, set this requisite for holy company, for divine atmosphere, so that things have a chance to sink in. Everything else is out of the way. Cell phones, maybe not computers, because you're watching me on one of those. So you get most things out of the way that are impediments to really deeply understanding these teachings, and I'll show you the 6 ways of how that's done in India in Tantra. Because Tantra and Vedanta, I often repeat, are 2 rivers in India that have been merging their waters and separating for a long time. The Vedantic side of it being a little bit leaning more towards the neti-neti and strict renunciation, monasticism, although the householders are coming to it, especially in the West when they're ready. And then Tantra leading more towards deity worship. That's where your Shaivism and your Shaktism and your Vaishnavism, that's where they fall in the spectrum of things, in this river of deifying everything. So how do these 2 rivers work together? I have charts on that. It could be a separate, it'll probably be shown, it has been shown in separate classes with different headings. But as far as Kaivalya is concerned, how to separate yourself from things that are distracting and things that change, and not necessarily things that need to be negative or horrible, although there's some of that admixture in there you have to be aware of. It's not like we go home to dinner and say, pass the chaff please. Hopefully there's some wheat. And of course, those of you who don't like wheat as your diet, please excuse the analogy. But basically the difference between the real grain and the husk is what we're talking about. So we don't want to end up with a diet of unnutritious things, which the world will give you plenty of. because it is based on vibrating particles with no substance. But what a lot of higher philosophies or philosophers maybe don't understand, it may not have substance, but it has essence. We can use English words to help draw those conclusions. The essence is something that doesn't change. It's always the backdrop, and if it wasn't there, then nothing else would be there. Substance, that can come and go. Our thoughts have substance sometimes, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes we dream, sometimes we're going to deep sleep and the mind shuts down. And still, that doesn't change anything, does it? So waking, dreaming, deep sleep are not necessarily transformative levels of consciousness. Transformation can happen on them, but you're going to have to know about this foundation that underlies everything. So, rope and the snake is a famous analogy we've been talking about. So, a student was talking to me about, well, here we have a man who's afraid of the snake because he mistook a rope for a snake. But the Advaitic look at that as how could you be afraid of the snake and the rope analogy? You would only suffer that if you didn't know what the nature of the rope is like. So if you don't know the rope at all, then rope and snake will become a duality to you. So you have to become a knower of reality, so that will place you on good footing. And the best thing that we know, and it applies when we study an Upanishad like we're doing, is to have that foundation well established in us. We must have at least perceived it and have accepted it as being the reality. As I just chanted, Sahana Bhavatu. May we student and teachers study that together as the reality. And then the chaff gets set aside from the substance and it doesn't plague you anymore. And fears and doubts will go away if you can hold that long enough. It's just like learning how to hold the essential and let go of the non-essential when after maybe lifetimes people have been holding on to the non-essential and thinking that to be real. So they are living with a diet of cotton candy, I like to say, quite often, instead of having nutritious foods every day. Philosophical for the mind. Prasadam is a great teaching in India. Most people would say, oh, that's sanctified food. But there's Jnana Prasad and there's Sam Prasad. You have purity of moods. You have food for your mood and you have food for your mind, which is called wisdom. And you have food for your Atman even. Adhyatma Prasad. So that's this non-dual truth that you'll hear, and if you hear it in a certain auspicious time, when your mind is free from a lot of clutter, that's when it'll make the deepest impression on you and stick. Snow does not stick on a wet road, Sri Ramakrishna said. So dry out the road, all the roads and avenues of the mind leading out here to the world. And then everything you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, and experience with the mind will collect that Dharma, like the Dharma drops in a bucket, Buddha said. So with the Kaivalya Upanisad having run down 9 slokas, we've looked at the meaning of Kaivalya, and we've had a few charts on what this word isolation in English really means for us. And that's why I continued to put up this chart here, because since you saw it last week, I've expanded it. And I'll just show you what the expansion is real quick so you'll have a full reckoning of it, because you can see what it says there. To know who you are, you must know what you are not, is the subtitle, which is a saying I made up after hearing too many people say, who am I, who am I, who am I, and then not giving any teachings as to what they meant after that. Have you ever said, who am I? You should ask yourself, who am I? Have you ever heard, who am I? Yeah, okay, I've heard it 3 times now. Now tell me what it really means. It really means to know who you are, you must know what you're not. Because people are trying to know who they are with all this clutter in the way. This is why I'm starting the class off this way. You have to get the mind free of all those distractions and overlays, false superimpositions, at all levels that you can possibly manage, and then sit and listen to the teachings. She sat and gave divine discourse for hours, they say about Divine Mother. She came to Earth to visit. That is, the Divine Mother Uma came to Earth to visit her daughter, the Queen. You see, the Queen goes running for her mother. It's a beautiful song in India. And Uma comes, means she enters the level of relativity and takes on a body. And the Queen comes running looking for her. And, oh, Mother, have you forgotten me? How could I ever forget you, my child? Now sit and listen while I discourse for hours on end. So this is how they think about it. And it's what happened in the court of King Dasaratha. We know by reading the scripture, Yoga Vishishta, that they gathered for hours at sunset, sometimes talked to sunrise the next morning about the Dharma, just that. Now, if days and days and nights of that don't change you, then nothing will. But if days and days and nights of thinking only of the world as your oyster, that'll change you a lot in so many different ways that you won't know what non-change is anymore. You won't be seeking the changeless, the immutable, the absolute, the birthless, the deathless, the timeless, the spaceless, the all-blissful. Krishna goes on in the Gita about different names for himself. The grandfather, the seed eternal. He just goes on throwing out these epithets to Arjuna on the battlefield there, as we'll look at the epithets in Brahman in these slokas that are coming up in the Kaivalya Upanisad. So on this chart, that's why I named it, to know, if you want to know who you are, just quit saying, who am I, only, and study the tattvas. That's the Adidaiva Vidya. That's the original divine wisdom of India that shows you that these tattvas, like earth, air, fire, water, ether, you dissolve earth into water, those two into fire, those three into air, those four into ether. This is an inward moving meditation you do in your mind to convince yourself that ether, air, fire, water, and earth came out of the mind in that order. Ether is the first, so space has to be there. And if you study that, unlike our physicists and astrologists and so forth, astronomers be a better word, then you would know that there's a kind of space that's non-physical, where your thoughts dwell. That's of course where your ancestors are too. And there's a higher space than that, where the rishis dwell. Thoughts of the great ones are there. And that's a deeper kind of space. So you begin to put together the orders of tattvas by doing this contemplation from the outside in. It's called involution. It's a word that people like here when they hear it, because science has left them only with evolution, and so that physics is the thing. You're a body, that's it. And consciousness sometimes doesn't have any play in there, except, when you get knocked on the head and it goes away. But when you go to deep sleep tonight and it goes away, they don't think about that unless they're a philosopher. And what happened to my consciousness when it wasn't knocked on the head unconscious, and it went unconscious anyway, as a natural state of one of the three matras of Om. Matra is a key word here. Everything comes from matrika. Even Ishvara comes from matrika. So these words, divine words, have to be there. And that's what I'll show you in a minute. But to keep you up to date on this chart, in case you're just chomping at the bit to know what changes I made inside of 7 days, I decided that rather than just leave it with listing how Indian traditions, basically here Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, Tantra, Jainism, Shaivism, Advaita Vedanta, and Kundalini Yoga, as if that's not enough. Shows you how multivariate and how deep and how long-lived Indian philosophy is. There's just nothing like it. And the great souls that founded all of these too are to be revered. And they go back thousands of years previous to the Christian era, and previous to Buddhism too, like Jainism. 24 generations of Tirthankaras before Buddha was born. So basically that's how ancient and long-lived this is. So these are the ways in which, and we looked at it last week, I won't go through it again, the ways in which all these darshanas dissolve things. For those who know that Brahman is the only reality and it's nameless and formless and objects and worlds disappear in it, as Sri Ramakrishna has told us, everything's soluble into Brahman in the end. For those who know this and want to prove it to themselves, then they'll automatically be about giving away rather than accumulating. If you're caught in accumulation, more and more objects, more and more wealth, more and more desires fostered out of that, peace of mind remains far away, as does the knowledge of Brahman, which is objectless and formless and beyond space that I just listed, these tattvas. So you're going to want to meditate upon that with a capital T, tat. That thou art, not all this here that's at your feet, or should be at your feet. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 darshanas I presented to you last week quickly, with their various systems, although there's more to add, of how they take these tattvas, or these obstacles to knowing the tattvas, and they practice dissolving them back to the source. That's the mind. Manas, the antakarna, the fourfold mind. And that's how practitioners of these darshanas, passive clear seeing, would each find their way to Kaivalya, which I just chanted about from the father of yoga. So, Kaivalya Swarupa Pratishta Vachiti Shakti iti, the last sutra of the Yoga Sutras, the very last one of all those sutras in the 4 padas. He mentions the Divine Mother there, and how she strips name and form away from nature. That's the word Kaivalya, it's right there. That's why Kaivalya Upanisad is a wonderful study to both the Vedantist and the Yogin. So we have this, she strips away name and form from nature, so this Shakti has allowed for this name and form to be projected from the mind on a cosmic, collective, and individual level. And at the end of a cycle of time, pralaya will happen and it'll all be withdrawn back to its seed form. All of this is evolution and involution. So you have to include involution if you're an Indian philosopher and a seeker after truth, into the quotient if you want to know who you are, and along the way know what you're not. The whole point is then very well presented and well taken and proved by all these darshanas. So there was a couple pillars there. So I took one of them and put in the Buddhism. Seemed just not quite right not to put in Buddhist way. So what you see here is the 12 Nidonas of Buddhism. So I put those there. You can see quickly on this chart before we leave it. You want to snap the 12 Nidonas. I would say that basically if you can snap one of them, the rest will start to crumble. That's kind of a good teaching. So what are Nidonas? These are links to what? To rebirth. Why? Because I'm caught in samsara in a series of rebirths, and I've built karmas, as you'll see, as listed in here, and those karmas are keeping me on the Kala Chakra, Buddha called it, the wheel of birth and death, with my ancestors, and also things like animals and trees and so forth, humans, subhumans, and ancestors, all on a loop. And when he was there 550 years prior to Jesus, he saw that India was in the throes of that kind of belief in samsara, and so he wanted them free. So Kaivalya would be a word that would come to the mind of a great soul like that immediately. And we have to isolate them from the causes of this cyclic birth and death. Because I just chanted from Vivekananda, this thirst for life forever quenched, because it drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. How much clearer can it be put here in this age by a modern rishi like him, a modern seer, a fully illumined soul that Sri Ramakrishna called a perfect being, Nityasiddha. So, drags from birth to death and death to birth of soul. I should think about this, you see, that I'm on this loop. This is why I'm occasionally having these thoughts that they used to call deja vu back in the 60s, right? Gee, man, I've been here before. You've never really been here at all was the answer to that. And I can prove it to you philosophically, but let's take it from ground zero first, and show you how to slough off the snake's skin. I mean, there's a snake in the rope, but what about the snake's skin? You have to slough that off in order to know what the snake is, and then be a knower of both. So the seers, and that's what this chant down here, the unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. So direct and bold by Sri Krishna. Om asat vidyate. The asat, non-existence, never is. Om asat vidyate, bhavo na bhavo, vidyate sattaha. Only the real is. Only vidya is real, not avidya. The truth about both, though, has been known by the seers. So they did follow this way, and this is some very good proof of it. Oh, what's in the way of this non-dual truth? In Samkhya, it was the 24 cosmic principles, because they're insentient. Yoga wanted to take those and make you meditate on them, so you'd know their connections and have an involution process. Vedanta slimmed it down into 5 sheaths for you. So you know that you wrapped yourself like a silkworm, which is one of the questions yesterday at satsang. You wrap yourself like a silkworm around the Atman in 5 layers. You wove 5 layers when you came here, and thinking yourself to be the outer layer. You're not even accounting for the other 4 layers. Let's not get into that yet. But it would be not accounting for your dreaming and deep sleep state too. It would be very similar to that. Tantra wanted you to deify all of existence, all strata of existence. Gods, goddesses, celestials, ancestors, elementals, humans, animals, insects, plants, it's all Brahman. But you have to prove it to yourself. Jainism wanted you to remove all avenues to violence. Shaivism wanted you to commune with and transcend with the higher tattvas. So beyond the 24 cosmic principles, there is this upper tier of things, like Sadashiva, Ishvara, and higher knowledge. That's where Sadakya came in, which I'll show you in a minute. I had to put it in parens there because Sadakya isn't listed in all the Shaivism philosophies, but I think it should be. It's a great, great system. And then finally, Advaita Vedanta, you just dissolve the mind stream. And that's where we left off last week with that chart on dissolving the mind stream into this. So what I added to it again was Buddhism. Snap the 12 Nidonas. That's avidya, which is ignorance, samskaras, which are mental impressions that bind you down, vijnana, namarupa, shadayatana, sparsha, vedana, trishna, upadana, bhava, jati, and jaramaranam. So that's this chart, and I took that out and put it in a separate chart, and I think we can safely venture away from this chart now, but that's what's been the addition here, and cleaned up a few little typos too for us. So let's look at the Nidonas, because we've looked at them before, but basically these links will bring back fall together over 3 births. They figure that most ordinary people, that means ordinary seekers, not ordinary worldly people, because they're never going to know they're bound. They're not asking the right questions yet. And they think the body is the natural state and life is what you're supposed to be doing. They don't have these thoughts about getting free of embodiment, or that the body is a limitation. In fact, we were talking about it before the class here today, that most people love birth and growth. You see, those are 2 of the 6 transformations, but they don't know yet about disease, decay, old age, and death. You see. So those 4 are coming down the pike, as they say. And usually you get to 50 or 60 or 70, or you're not healthy in your 40s, you'll begin to brood upon these birth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Or not birth, disease, old age, decay, and death. But birth and growth, they consider those things to be paramount. You see. So 2 of the 6 transformations they prefer. Everyone loves birth. They say, oh, a birth of a child. But the seers are thinking, there's another 80 years before, or maybe 50 years until they get to disease, old age, decay, and death. And maybe they're going to be thinking differently about transformation at that point because they're suffering. And while they're young, they're not. So there's a lot of wisdom that comes with the aging process. That's called growth. And that's suspect too. The Lord Buddha, who's one of the 3 great systems of Buddhism, is this. It's called Praticca Samutpata. I don't know if I put that on this chart, but this is one of the 3 great systems of Buddhism, along with the 4 Noble Truths and Eightfold Path and so forth. So this Lord Buddha's teaching on this is focusing here upon people who wake up and then maybe think, how long is it going to take me to get free now that I've heard the truth? Shravana. And go back to Vedanta here, side by side with it. You got to get Shravana. You got to find a teacher who will tell you the truth. Then think about it deeply, manana, and then nididhyasana, get actual experience of the truth for yourself. That'll snap the links that Buddhism is talking about here. So quickly through these, there's a root ignorance that happens. Failure to affirm the suffering-ridden nature of existence and renounce it. So pleasure and pain, good and bad, chains that hold, one of iron, one of gold. We repeat that often in Swami Vivekananda's thinking. So avidya is that root ignorance, mula vidya, which is there when you're born, and on earth at least. Who doesn't have it? Say even the avatars are under its influence for a while. Until the mechanisms that they've taken on consciously can develop enough so that their memory kicks in and they remember who they are at a very young age. I mean, just look at Swami Vivekananda and Ramana Maharshi and people like that, even in our more recent times, who woke up to the fact that they were the Atman, or they were Buddha nature, and immediately started their journey. Even Jesus at 14, evidently. I must be about my Father's business. That's just a statement of, I'm not the world. These are not my parents. This is not my work to do. I have to be about my Father's business, which is fully awakening the rest of the world to this truth that has just dawned upon me in full force at the right moment, the God-given moment, I would say the Divine Mother-given moment, the mother of all auspiciousness, including time. So they waken up there and they see the truth and they're about their Father's business. Sometimes at a very young age. Shankara, what was that? 8? He was in that state of awakening, 8 years old, and they tested him and he recalled all the scriptures out of his mind at 8. He hadn't been studying up to that time much. Oh, what's this? What's that? Who said this? What's that teaching mean? He was just coming out with it. Because in another lifetime he had memorized it all. I mean, you think it's rather impossible, but I sat in front of Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, my own guru in this lifetime, and he could recite the entire Bhagavad Gita by heart in his 90s. So what's that going to mean to his next birth? You see, if you believe in rebirth. Or what does it mean, why could he do that and retain it so quickly? Because he had done so in his last birth. So you learn it, you pay it forward. That's the death of what? The first link. They don't come here with a chain. They're unbound, they're free, never bound is what Vivekananda called it. Those of you who like Jaima music that I've put out, you can go get that album, Ever Free, Never Bound. And musically understand the way I feel about that term by listening to that music, ever free, never bound. It's a philosophical phrase turned by Swami Vivekananda when he was here amongst us. So that first link gets snapped. So How do you snap it? Well, don't fail to affirm that this world is full of suffering. Holy Mother said that. Say, this world, the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones, she said. May you never be born here again in a body and suffer birth and death. So this wasn't just something she said in a flight of fancy while she was rolling a chapati or something. This was strong advice from a knower of Brahman. And so you would take it seriously if you heard it coming from such a source. Second link attached to that is samskaras. Notice on the left-hand column the Nidonas 1 and 2. These are the first two links. They're from the previous experience. So you had a vidya before and you didn't snap that link, and you built mental impressions on top of it called samskaras, which are subtle deposits from physical, verbal, and psychological actions that form in the mind. So thought, word, and deed, however you want to put it, and act, there are actions being done by people all the time that are running grooves in their mind, the same groove again and again, till it gets so deep the cows can't get out of it on the way to the barn. Sri Krishna said, back and forth between the field and barn, they run this groove, this bunch of cattle. So people sort of like that think this same way again and again and again, and they run a groove in the mind. That's called a samskara in yoga psychology. Forget your Western psychology as far as past lifetimes are concerned. Freud and Jung didn't even entertain the thought much. You got to go to India to find out that they have done a deep study on past lifetimes. Just look at the Tibetan Buddhists and read the Book of the Dead. That's in the title, Book of the Dead. It's not like Night of the Living Dead. That's what you could also forget. But this is the Book of the Dead. That means they never really died. And there's an art to non-dying, and there's an art to spiritual living that they keep constant. Remember the chart last week? We saw the 4 Padas of Shiva, and how these teachers come and keep these great teachings of Shaivism and what we're looking at now, Buddhism, current. In Buddha's case now, for 2,500 years, Buddhism has been there. It's not a huge amount of time according to Indian philosophy, but it's a huge amount of time according to the lifetimes that you could assume. And the gratitude you would have to be rescued by a system like this if you took it seriously. So Vijnana awareness gets crystallized by previous life experiences and enters into wombs. I really like Buddhism's straightforward way of saying this in the English language. The way it can be translated with no doubts, no curves thrown, no punches pulled. They're just saying it the way it is in very simple terms. Third link is Namarupa, name and form. A fresh body is formulated based upon past impulses and impressions. Due to this relative consciousness, I've always stopped here to make sure to clarify that Vijnana in Vedanta is something much higher than what it's listed as here. In Buddhism, Vijnana is used as relative consciousness. In Vedanta, Vijnana is almost the highest thing you can attain. So you'll have to know between the ages of India that they used these Sanskrit and by this time Pali words to mean different things used in different contexts. So don't get confused by that. In other words, be flexible with your Sanskrit interpretations. After Nama Rupa, which is just name and form, it's, remember, the first 2 aspects of a 5-fold Maya, right? Then there's Shadayatana, the 6 bases. You have these experiences springing from exposure to the realms of the senses and develop more karma. You pile more gloom on gloom. Vivekananda said, you've got this karma you don't know you have, it brought you here, you're not aware of it, you do more actions with that karma in operation and it brings more karma to bear. It's a link to exacerbated condition of rebirth. Then Sparsha follows. I'm going through this quickly. We do this maybe once a year or every 2 years because it's one of the great teachings of India, particularly of Buddhism. So then you have Sparsha, intermingling with the world, its peoples, and its objects contributes to more karmic conditioning. So you can see how it's really a read on karma. If you look in India, you'll see the 4 types of karma, the 4 colors of karma, and other teachings of karma, the 3 kinds of karma, Sanchita, Prarabdha, and Agami. And sometimes they throw in Kriyamani, which is a kind of a spontaneously arising karma that you don't know where it came from. So it's similar to that, and of course those systems were much more ancient than the one I'm reading here now. So karma is a big word in India, and is the cause of many things, including these samskaras and these impressions. Because we must remember, these are people who are bound, so they have this chain around their neck, you see, and other souls are born without that. They don't need to seek enlightenment. So we have to look at those two, the contrast between those two, these free souls, ever free, never bound, and this multitude of souls that keep coming back again from the ancestor realm to try and satisfy more desires which cannot be fulfilled here on earth without the Dharma. And go looking for the Dharma. I challenge you all. Non-self-effort is the rust of households, he said. So that's what you'll find out there, a lot of rusty things. Rusty minds. And slothfulness is the rust of societies, so it's not just in certain households you'll find that corrosion. You'll find it in societies too. And the least amount of it you'll find in India, Tibet, and places where these teachings have been broadcast by illumined souls to a greater amount of people who are less attached to objects as a result, and have less weights on them when they're born. So there's Sparsha. Then Vedana, don't mistake the word for anything like Vedanta, please. Vedana means sensations. Continual and repeated stimulation of body and senses adds further conditionings. So again, back to our youth. Let's see, we're going to go, oh yeah, they're just sowing their wild oats, I think is a saying for, oh, just let boys be boys kind of thing, you see. But so don't discipline them, don't call them back, don't tell them to not squander their precious physical energy. What to speak of when they squander it, they do it in the wrong way and cause problems for the societies and the families. So what, you're just going to throw them to the 4 winds and not discipline them early? So, I mean, I've seen Buddhist monks who are 4, 5, 6 years old. They're already monks. They're sitting reading the scriptures in this position. You think they're going to have any problems in the rest of their life? You think they're going to come back with a chain like this, an ignoble chain around their neck, which not only causes them and others to suffer, but keeps them from enjoying the bliss of the Atman, or in this case, Buddha nature. Trishna is next. It develops a constant craving or desire for further contact with the senses and objects. And it's because they can gain satisfaction. So if you've heard me before, or if you were with me in the company of my guru, he would often say, satiation never comes. Without the Dharma, it's futile. You're just pouring fire, gasoline on fire, when you're trying to satisfy your desires in the world. A bunch of zeros adds up to nothing. But if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, huge number. So Dharma is that one thing, if you will, to put in front of all your experiences so that they all fulfill you and you're up and out of here before the chain can even form. Or you'll, at least if you have formed it already, snap a few of those links and the rest will just dissipate into the ethers, you see, when you pass from the body. It's called the bardo, when you go into the bardo of afterlife. And the bardo of returning. It will be all clear to you what's going on. I happen to be one of those that thinks that everyone who passes away has a moment of clarity. But they have a choice in that bardo. after death, to choose the light or to choose rebirth. And there are some certain weights on them that are influencing that decision. They may think it's of their own free will. Free will doesn't happen until you're one with Brahman. There's no argument about that in India, or no contention and no debate going on about it. It's a misnomer. So as long as you're in the realm of samsara or maya or any of these lifetimes you're taking name and form in time and space, then you're under the subjection of maya. And in that case, then you're going to want to be snapping some of these links as early as you can, and watch the rest of that chain go away over the next 2 lifetimes. Would be a good way of putting it, because it takes 3 lifetimes, they say. I said earlier, for ordinary seekers to snap these chains. Ordinary people, that's not what I'm saying. They're not trying to snap this. This is their life. You see, this might be a good television program. This is your life, and show that chain. You see. Upadana's next, attachment, selfish clinging to sense life, then enmeshes the mind deeper in embodied existence. Krishna says in the Gita, there are many wombs to be born in, Arjuna. I think he's referring not just to human wombs, because some of those wombs are dark. Yes, dark human wombs are there, born in the wombs of evil parents and ignorant parents, who are laboring under these self-same chains, by the way. But there's also the possibility in Hinduism and Buddhism both that you can take on an animal birth. The way you understand that, even an insect birth, is that these are all dreams you're having, you see. So even your human birth is a dream. It's something that you've dreaming for 80 Earth years, which is a matter of a few seconds in deep sleep. So then why couldn't you dream that you were a bird, or why couldn't you dream that you were an animal of some kind? Somebody's cute little pet, you see. These are all dreams you're having. So if you look at them as being non-substantial like that, then you can make more sense out of that that assertion that you can take on different wombs. You can be born in different wombs. That's attachment, though, upadana. That's a pretty deep level of chain right there. Bhava is a new birth, but it's not a new birth like, oh boy, we're free, new birth like Vivekananda. It's due to decay of the old body. The desire for the new body arises, and some of the teachings I've heard, the old people sitting around waiting to die have already chosen their next birth on earth. They've already chosen their parents in this dream of birth and death. They met people along the life, and they're holding an ideal of their own to say, that's where I want to go next, without knowing that coming and going are all mere nonsense. Where's the time of coming when all of time is in the soul? Where's the time of going? Where's the space where you will go to when all space is in the soul? So they haven't realized that it's all taking place right there in the Atman. See? But the mind ego complex has gotten a hold of it and is flinging it here and there, far-flung consciousness into worlds, 270 worlds with 51 alphabets. This is one level. Tantra talked about it. We'll look at that soon. So Jati Rebirth happens when it chooses a new body. Passage from birth to death occurs under karmic circumstances, resulting in another body. This goes on, you get the point. And Jara Maranam also goes on, old age and death. After life and passage from the new body, life gets perpetuated in another body. So they're wanting you to know that if you have knowledge of this being a chain, and that there is a freedom to attain called nirvana, beyond samsara, then you will begin working on snapping those chains. Some of those chains have gotten very rusty, if we want to follow up with the analogy. So maybe that rust could make them weaker if you realized that they're there. You could snap these chains. O Snapper of this world's chains is a famous song in the Ramakrishna order, Khandana Bhava Bandhana, it's called. You sing it every night at Arati. Thousands of people are singing it around the world. So it means snapper of this world's chains, and it's pointing to Sri Ramakrishna. If you take refuge in a great soul like that, then he will help you snap the chains of birth and death. And like Krishna says in the Gita, you'll go along the sunlit path, never to return here again. If you don't want to. There's always the bodhisattva, Jivan Mukta idea in India, specific to both Buddhism and Vedanta, to where beings can come back of their own accord, free. Well, I don't think it took us too long to pull those teeth again. We do this once every 2 years. Look at the Nidonas. It's a marvelous system. It's really excellent, and right out of Buddha's teachings and right out of interior of Mother's philosophies. So in that way, then, both of these charts have been looked at. Let's move on in the Kaivalya Upanisad, because we've then covered those 8 or 9 slokas, and we're catching up. So this I'll also make as clear and painless as possible, because it's a very complex system. But if you've been studying a while any of this that's here, then you'll know that Sadakya is one of those tantric teachings that had its heyday at a certain time. There are several philosophies of Shaivism. Kashmiri Shaivism is a list that's up here, but there's a couple other slightly different listing of 12 tattvas in Shaivism. That one of those is called Sadakya. It happens at a very high level after Ishvara and prior to Nada. The word is Sadakya, because it's all based upon these 6 things. Sadakya means 6. These 6 ways in which the Tantrists have come to know Brahman. Keep that in mind as we look at it. Those 6 things are Kala, Tattva, Bhuvana, Varna, Pada, and Mantra. What do those mean? Kala means aspects of the divine. Tattva means categories of the divine, as you know from air, earth, fire, water, ether, and so forth. Bhuvana means regions. So it'd be like akashas, lokas, worlds, not just out, inward. The kings of heaven within you are included in these regions. Varna is letters, pada is words, and mantras are utterances. So the whole thing really is pointing to the word. So this chart is an answer that if you ask a Samkhya Yogin, or if you ask a Patanjali Yogin, if you ask a Vedantist, if you ask a Buddhist, if you ask a Jain, if you ask a practitioner of Kundalini Yoga, if you ask a practitioner of Shaivism and so forth, you get to know where I'm leading for. This is the answer to the question you're asking, which is, what's in a word? This is what they tell you, what's in a word. So Matakai just said, which is something we'll look at in a minute, is means particles of intelligence in words. So you can see how people have been inspired by that idea of particles of streaming intelligence. And they know about particles of wisdom in your mind because they're yoga psychologists. They're not just physical scientists. So they know particle theory should be taken deeper and deeper into tattvas, into regions, into letters, into words, and into mantras. This is how it all distilled from the internal ancient wisdom, and how it can all be dissolved back if you know it. So that's why I had to, along with the Buddhist Nidonas, inserted in there. Sadakya is there as one of these great higher 12 principles, as a way that Tantra goes about knowing Brahman. So you can see the title there, The 6 Ways of Attaining Brahma Gyan, Knowledge of the Ultimate in Tantra. It has its own way of doing that. The quote here to start us off from the Tantras: With self-purification achieved, liberation proceeds via extracting the essence of the scriptures and gaining an intellectual conviction leading to mature spiritual discrimination. Lifeless mechanical rites and rituals do not work. If rubbing the body with ashes could bring liberation, then village dogs could have it. So they put a nice little quip in there about rites and rituals. Well, I think I'm going to do this ritual and it'll give me this effect. But that effect never comes and they still remain ignorant. Still remain in the chain. 12 links of the chain, if you want. Carry it forward. On the other hand, let me reread it. With you achieve self-purification, liberation proceeds by extracting the essence of the scriptures and gaining an intellectual conviction leading to mature spiritual discrimination. So, I mean, I would say this is not just tantric, this is foundation, this is what you would do with every one of these darshanas, that statement from the tantras. That's how important words are, slokas are, sutras are, scriptures are, and the ones who meditate to retrieve those self-same things from the eternal word and bring it forward and manifest it here in the world. It all comes from the word that Jesus talked about himself when he was living. So that word is Om, as far as we're concerned, A-U-M, which has so many connotations to it, as we know. The one that we look at probably as non-dualists would be waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. The A-U and M stands for those, and the little Shvara stands for Advaita, non-duality, called Turiya, or the fourth state. So this is why all of these darshanas of India have this ongoing love affair and reverence for the word. And in this way, Tantra has put it that this is how we're showing you how important the word is. First, kala aspects. Manifestation is in the nature of reality. This is tantric for sure, because basically Vedanta would say, let's just not think about that right now. We're going to go towards non-manifestation, and that's our focus. So Advaita and Buddhism and so forth are going to go toward the formless, rushing towards that to snap the chains of rebirth and know what Brahman is, or know what their true nature is. But Tantra takes this more gradual approach to everything. As I said here, it wants to deify the strata of existence, all these beings. It wants to see them as Brahman, and that's no different than Advaita Vedanta either. So they say with Vedanta and Tantra, the result's the same. The way they go about it varies. So Tantra is going to take a slower look at it, more gradual look at it. And Vedanta will take a sword and just cut at the highest level, as high as it can possibly cut. And then walk away with a free mind, like Kali is holding in her hand. So that's maybe enough information for now about manifestation in Tantra. So Kala, it has 5 main forms. It presides over all the cosmic principles, pure, mixed, and impure. Here's the pure, impure ones here: earth, air, fire, water, ether, excretion, procreation, motion, handling, speaking. Those are all impure tattvas. These are mixed tattvas. And when it gets to Shaivism, these are the pure tattvas. That's how they're looking at it. So that's called Shuddha, Shuddha, and Ashuddha. Impure, mixed pure and impure, and pure. This doesn't mean morally, because India doesn't concern itself so much with that. It figures you've already gotten morality and ethics by the time you come to a teaching this high, or you wouldn't have even been attracted here in the first place. There's a natural filter that the Divine Mother Shakti we're talking about here won't even let people through that filter if they haven't got their P's and Q's together. If they haven't crossed their T's, dotted their I's religiously and philosophically yet, then they won't even come to systems like this. So in that way, these tattvas fall over a variety of three kinds of levels of philosophical purity or lack thereof. And it really means some of them are just outright insentient. They just don't have any light at all in them of their own. Some of them have a little more light in them. Some of them are filled with light. If you look at everything like that, all the worlds, that is what's coming, all the regions, all the letters, all the words, all the mantras, if you can begin to look at everything like that, then you're the great discriminator. See? And you know where to put everything in its proper category as you encounter it, not after the fact later, after karma has accrued, but as you encounter it. The best dancer never makes a wrong step, Sri Ramakrishna said. So a great dancer, like I played for Baryshnikov, and great as a cellist, I played for great dancers like that. And if they ever did make a mistake on stage, nobody knew it except them. And they'd come back after, oh, I really ruined that dance. See, but we didn't see anything wrong with it. It was great, you know. So that's where an expert dancer never takes a wrong step. So that's true about the philosophy too. If you are knower of Brahman, then things that seem to be mistakes, you just gracefully switch them into a part of the play. And there's some souls who can do that marvelously. So that has to be explained. Sorry, I stopped, but mixed, pure and impure philosophically, it needs to be explained to us. How sensuity gets into something, to a more or less degree. So my teacher would try and explain this to us. He'd say, light shines off of a rock pretty poorly, right? Light shines off of a leaf a little better. Life shines off of a lake pretty good, as long as there's no wind, which is it's got its own meaning, the wind of desire. But it shines off a mirror best of all. You see, no desire is possible for the mirror. It's just not going to waver. So that's how light is in different things, physically speaking. So use that as a metaphor for minds. Some are rocks, some are leaves, some are lakes, and some are mirrors. And those great souls we're talking about just shine this light steadily, like a Vivekananda or a Shankara, all the time without any wavering whatsoever. They are who they are, they know it, and that's where manifestation is in the nature of reality in the highest way. You see. They're amazing to encounter those souls. They impress millions of people over thousands of years. So what is it about them? Well, Tantra is explaining it very nicely in terms of Shuddha, and Ashuddha. We want to stay away from those impure tattvas as much as possible. That is, if you think you're the body, then you think you're air, earth, fire, water, and ether, and you think that excretion, procreation, locomotion, handling, and speaking are the highest things that you have on hand. But none of those transform your mind into the Atman. You see. In fact, they will, as we can see by the world, turn into weights for people. Even for great thinkers, they're weights. So these Kala itself simultaneously assists the unmanifest to transition into the manifest, acts as a guide for all seekers of self-realization. So now we find out they're talking much more about how philosophy at its highest helps beings. And remember what I just chanted at the beginning of class, that primordial Shakti, she'll take the transmigrating soul and return it to its source, right? Father of yoga. There it is, right there, repeated in Tantra at a much earlier age than that statement in Patanjali. So Kala then is this principle that assists the unmanifest transition into the manifest, guides it back. So this is a very high principle you're talking about there. Kala is also, by the way, another name for Lord Shiva. So if you're under the auspice of Shiva, I mean, this is a system of Shaivism, right? So if you're under the auspice and refuge of Lord Shiva, he's the guiding force that's going to take you in and out of bodies. And Yama It's just a function that he operates. Death is his power to take you from one place to another. And if you've taken refuge in Shiva, then you're 100% saved at all times. What to speak of liberated? I couldn't get past these 3 sentences without giving commentaries on each one of them, because Tantra goes that deep and a lot of people don't know it. I'll try and finish this paragraph then. As possessor of Shakti, at its highest level, Kala is the supreme Shakti, the prime mover. At the same time absorbed in reality, incapable of being differentiated from it, yet partially and independently emergent via its own divine will. Answers your question. One of the students asked me yesterday in the garden when we were there yesterday about Shakti and its role and how it moves things at a very high philosophical and spiritual level too. So I hope that this helps explain Kala, which also means time and also has a name for Shiva. And Tantricism is, as I say, a part of that tantric stream that's flowing, along with Vaishnavism and Vishnu and Shaktism and Divine Mother. These are what? Deities. That's coming up, isn't it? Categories or tattvas, then, is next. Let's look at that. Beginning with the elements and proceeding to Shiva and Shakti, consciousness as experience is made up of worlds, bhuvanas, which are planes of existence consisting of tattvas. So they're going about it in such a way because it's a hard order to follow. They could start at the bottom with words, mantras, show you what they mean, that they consist of matrikas, particles, and that those are varnas, alphabets, which are lays, garlands around the gods' necks, these alphabets. And then that those are in regions, 14 of them. And you could be coming at it this way, but they're thinking, well, maybe we should tell them about the primordial Shakti, which is also Shiva, by the way, here, because they're not mentioning her, are they? Or him. Tattva is just that power. So whether you want to look at it as Kala or Kali, that's up to you, you see. But that's that primordial power in Tantra that's directing everything. And it's made up of worlds, and those worlds are made up of tattvas. So they're saying that out in advance because they're going to show us the world soon, bhuvanas. But let's look first at what's in them. It's kind of a little bit, it's hard to say which one's chicken and egg thing. But you all know the physical tattvas, and lo and behold, they're right there in Samkhya and in yoga. See, there they are. Don't we know them all already? Earth, fire, water, air, ether, odor, flavor, visibility, tangibility, audibility, excretion, procreation, locomotion, handling, speaking, smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, and hearing. That's the whole package of Lord Kapila gave us as the 24 cosmic principles, physical tattvas. But he also included in there the psychical tattvas. Sorry for the word, I couldn't figure out a better one. Psychical tattvas means mind, thought, intelligence, and ego. Well, there's the fourfold mind out of which all of this came. So you don't forget to make the connection. Physical body, mental body, physical world, inner worlds, kings of heaven. Also it has, and here's where you'd have to be led into the 12 higher tattvas of Shaivism, which Kapila did not give you. See, didn't mean he didn't talk about them, but he's talking mostly about those things which you need to know that you're not, in order to know who you are. Get the connection here. So the others, all of a sudden, he starts throwing out these cosmic principles. They are Purusha, the soul. Interesting, isn't it? Most people don't even know they have a soul. Some people don't believe in a soul. I mean, this is by the millions we're talking. They either don't believe in a soul, or they have no idea that they have a soul. So Purusha is starting at a high level in today's world to try and convince them that there's a sentient principle inside the insentient tattvas. So wouldn't you want to tell them you're not earth, air, fire, water, and ether, because those are 5 elements that make up your body. So your body is made up of those, so you're not the body. And so those 6 things, Deha, then are accompanied with these 5 senses, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, and seeing. And those have some subtler aspects to them, called locomotion, handling, out externally and internally. Tanmatras are called in Samkhya. So you'd want to tell them everything they're not, because you're leading them towards who they are. So this is where you take up a study of Sadakya based only upon having learned from your teachers, from your acharyas, from your gurus, about Samkhya for a couple decades, about yoga for a couple decades, and so forth. Then you can understand this. It's just all Greek otherwise. It's going to be too much for you. And that's the Sanskrit. That's the whole thing is Devabhasha. It's all coming out of words. And words and thoughts have this intrinsic connection. Shabda Brahma, Holy Mother said. You have to realize all this belongs to Shabda Brahman. It's God as sound. Shabda Brahma means God as sound. So she might as well be saying God as vibration. It's no different than science, is it? Except right there is the focus. What vibrates according to the senses. Or if you go into psychology, then it's, what vibrates according to your thoughts, right? Now they're looking at your thoughts. Inside a physical brain, however, not inside the kingdoms of heaven, the mind of the Lord, the mind of God, or the collective mind. Those are not yet encountered in Western psychology. So you're simultaneously filling out this whole periphery of things that, yes, they have less sentiency externally and a little more sentiency internally. I didn't finish the list. Purusha, cosmic laws called niyati. Time in its phases called kalas. That's where you learn about the 4 yugas and how those make up a Mahayuga, and how 16 of those make up a Manvantara, and how this is all going on forever in time. And then time itself, kala, and then higher knowledge, vidya. Subtle matter comes in, karya maya. So this is very beautiful, because all of a sudden you're thinking, you mean all of this out here, air, earth, fire, water, and ether, is manifested prakriti, and it came from subtler matter. So my mind is filled with subtle matter, and I'm not accounting for it. So I don't know the origin of the earth and everything here, number one, and I don't know that all of this is a reflection of unmanifested prakriti that's in my mind, made of what? Thoughts, which create worlds, bhuvanas, which consist of letters, which consist of particles, and which end up as divine utterances if you keep it vishuddha. See, if you keep it all vishuddha. Or acknowledge the ashuddha as being distinct from shuddha. See, dine on some wheat, forget the chaff for a while. So psychical tattvas, physical tattvas, it's dense, it's profound, it's very informative. You can take a couple years and look at it now. Repeat this class over and over. Come to some more classes on it. Seek the testament of the scriptures. Forget about this fallen tantra that they're following nowadays. Left-handed tantra, they call it, and so forth. What's that ever done anyone except degraded? As tantra degraded over time. This is the real tantra here. This is the real teaching. This is the Brahma Gyan of tantra. So we'd have to round this out by looking for something vishuddha, something very pure. So this is spiritual tattvas. We're so, well, I can speak for myself, I'm so grateful, you see, that they included this in the philosophy, that there are spiritual tattvas. What are they? Oh, please tell me, you see. Inner guidance. What's the word for it? Sadakya itself. This is how they guide you. They'll give you the 6 ways of coming to knowledge of Brahman in Tantra, if they're Advaita Tantrists. Spiritual wisdom, that's called Bindu, by the way. That's associated here with the third eye. Bindu, third eye, Nada, the divine sound, and Kalatita. They often use that in Tantra to slim this down to 3 things. Bindu, Nala, Kalatita. And non-duality, Shuddha Vidya, pure knowledge is non-duality. Primal sound, Nada, and supreme deity, Ishvara. If you look at the tattvas over here, if you could see them, then you'd find out, if you're going up the Tantra way, that you're finding, the Shaivism way too, you're finding Ishvara as a very, very high level of sentiency. And that's where we're meditating on when we have our mantra. Ishvara means Krishna, or nowadays Ramakrishna. So that's what you focus your mind on with these mantras and words consisting of alphabets that you're drawing them from. And the letters, each letter means something. And in each letter there's particles of intelligence which are called Shakti, which leads you all back up to Kala again, you see. So what are the bhuvanas then? The number 4 of the 6-fold Sadakya. 224 realms lie within 14 universes. And this is, of course, out of an ancient time. There's probably more, and the same with alphabets, which we're coming to. 7 higher and 7 lower, ranging from gross to subtle. Some correspond to the 5 elements, others to subtler worlds, which exist beyond the physical plane. That's an important statement. Some of these worlds apply to the 5 elements. Other of these worlds are beyond the physical plane. So that's where they would be made up of psychical tattvas, not physical tattvas alone. They're located in those spiritual vortexes called ta-da, chakras. So you can see Kundalini Yoga has Tantra has a definite claim to Kundalini Yoga. Essentially, all realms of existence lie within. Oh yes, let's just throw that in at the end to make sure that you know that even this physical world is not what it seems to be. It's a dream made by your thoughts that you're moving through with a thought body. So there is no other thing than Brahman. There is no separate world from Brahman. So this here is Brahman right now, at all times, in all places, in all locations. And the only way I'm going to convince people who don't know that is by mantra and varna and pada, the power words, bijams, that are a part of the alphabet, varna, of words that the seers are speaking all the time and keeping alive, like Sanskrit has been over many, many millennia, even in our own history. It goes back so many thousand years. Well, if you just want them listed, although I know that in the Tantras, in the Puranas, and in the Vedas, who all had this way of thinking, they had a little bit differences to these, and the beings who were the 7 rishis are slightly different too. But there's Brahmaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, Maharloka, Svarloka, Bhuvarloka, and Burloka. What do we say? Bur, Bhuva, Swa, Tat, Savitur, Varenyan, Tat. See? Savitur, Varenyan. We've gone through that great Gayatri mantra many times, word by word, and taken it apart. So what you're saying when you're saying Bhurabhuva Swaha is just acknowledging those first three worlds, which are part of the Sadakya system, which have been formed by words, expressed by words, and have come out of the highest principle of Kala, according to the deities. You see. So that's why Tantra is a lot about deity yoga, and so is Upasana. And there's a lot said about Vipassana nowadays. Don't forget Upasana, the ancient way of deities connecting to worlds, connecting to words, connecting to thoughts, all guided by a higher deity, by the highest deity. We don't want to forget all that in our rush towards non-duality. In fact, you'll probably achieve non-duality only by understanding that. In the 5 minutes or so remaining, we might be able to give you the definitions. We can think about them during the break. Varna, the garland of letters, called Varnamala. It is the science of 51 alphabets, probably many more in India since then, which is an expression of the Mahashakti, the essence of indivisible truth, which reveals the mystery of creation. The mystery of creation is called Shrishti Rahasya. It vibrates via particles of intelligence, chit matras, and includes three main elements: matrikas, shabda, and artha, alphabets, words, and their meanings. Devoid of matrika shakti, consciousness will not reveal itself. Worlds, beings, objects, even Ishvara, all evolve from matrika, from mother, from her utterances, from her bijams. She gives the Trinity. Oh, we didn't say that right here. Where is it? Brahmaloka, the highest of all these worlds, is under the auspice of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Tapaloka, Vairagas, there are 7 of them. Janaloka, many, many seers. Mahaloka, sages. Svarloka, the gods. Bhuvarloka, the siddhas. Burloka, the humans, with animals, insects, and so forth. So these 7 worlds are tiered like that. And if you want to align them to the 7 chakras, go ahead. They work pretty well that way. So worlds, beings, objects, even Ishvara, all evolve out of Mother Wisdom, Mother Word. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. You don't think Jesus didn't know about this? How important all of this was, no matter what language he used in the Middle East at the time? Whether he went to India or not, which is a matter of sometimes contention between people, but just sometimes our lack of historical knowledge, he knew about the Word and told John about it. John was meditating on the Word in a cave at the end of his life, evidently. And he thought that teaching was so powerful that he should know the Word. This is the Word here, and it's been here around since before time began. It's the word time came out of it. Kala is that first principle. Well, pada then, so we can do the great achievement of taking the whole Sadakya essence teaching in 1/2 of a class. Pada is the construction and meaning of whole words springing from matrika. It's what is called pada. The arrangement of these words into statements and profound utterances is constitutive of mantras. Mantras, yes, like you use given from your teacher, but mantras also are slokas and sutras. All of these slokas and sutras that you memorize using your swadhyaya sadhana, recite and memorize, and which is the rust of the lack of wisdom scriptures in monasteries, all of that is so important, and it transcends the realm of just say, I'm doing my mantra in order to connect with the deity. That's important too. But all of that is infused with Mother Wisdom, and so that you can't even say a word, see, without it turning into something. It's the secret of manifestation is in the utterance of the words. So these are great worlds that got, these lokas here are great words that God uttered that are mantras. How many words we use for just superficial things, for banal things, evil things, and totally ignorant, non-intelligent ways of using words. Let's go to the whole other side of that, and see that there has to be an opposite to it, and that's these mantras, and these full of matrikas, mother power, particles of intelligence that we can't see with the physical tatras, but which are there in the psychical tatras, and which we learn about when we get the spiritual tattvas under our belt, when we get qualified for them. And imagine how the world of words would change for you, just like it changed for intellectuals when they learned better English, see? Or when prehistoric man learned to actually communicate with words. Mother was there, say, let's try and get this into the mind, get it understood. It's at a very primal level, it's at the highest level too. So mantra, to end this half, it's the science of cosmic sound. It's direct knowledge. Divine spontaneous action proceeds from it. Tattvas form the objective side of the experience. Let's go back up, see what tattvas are. And so those tattvas form the objective side of mantra, while mantra forms the subjective side. By practicing these two aspects, one attains spiritual ascendancy. Mantra then is special knowledge which, when contemplated, reveals the otherwise unseen truth that the universe is full of Brahman. And here we will take our break. Thank you for staying with me. I hope you did well for the teaching on Sadakya, one of these great cosmic principles of Shaivism, very much connected to these slokas we're studying, these first 9 slokas of the Kaivalya Upanisad. So here we will take a break.